Hello and welcome to Sound Strategic, the podcast of the International Institute for Strategic Studies. I'm Meia.
And I am Antonio Sampaio. Today we're discussing fragility, a concept that has acquired increasing relevance when it comes to international security and armed conflict, since it expresses deep-rooted flaws in the political systems of many countries affected by conflict and armed violence. Fragile countries are those with deep governance challenges and state institutional weaknesses, and therefore are unable to fulfill basic expectations of their populations. Our guest is Franck Bousquet, who is Senior Director of the World Bank's Fragility, Conflict and Violence Group.
Frank, welcome. The World Bank has traditionally been associated with promoting socioeconomic development and fighting poverty. Why is the bank increasing its focus on tackling issues like conflict and violence?
Well, first, thank you, Meia. Thank you, Antonio. Very happy to be part of this interview, focusing on how to help countries impacted by fragility, conflict, and violence. And just to rebound on your first questions, why does the World Bank focus on those set of countries? Because there is a direct link with our twin goal that consists to eradicate poverty. In fact, extreme poverty is increasingly concentrated in location that we call FCV, fragility, conflict, violence location. A report that we just released 2 months ago shows that by the end of 2030, most of the extreme poor will live there. So that's for us, it's very clear. We need to be present where the poorest people are because that's where the need is. And unfortunately, if I may add, if you look at the trend over the past few years, this agenda of fragility, conflict, and violence, FCV, is more important than ever. I mean, as you know, the global fragility landscape has in fact worsened significantly in recent years, impacting, by the way, low but also middle-income countries. And the violent conflicts have increased to the highest level observed over the past 3 decades. So clearly, this is an issue extremely important to achieve our twin goal, to eradicate poverty. And also I would like to mention that this is, however, not new for the bank. The bank was set up after World War II to focus on RD, meaning the reconstruction of countries. In fact, the first beneficiary country was my home country, France, and we have been involved on those topics of reconstruction since the very beginning. What has changed over the past few years is that now we are actually being involved across the fragility spectrum, moving from purely a focus on reconstruction to a work during crisis, but also working on prevention.
Precisely on this issue of on this change that the World Bank has been introducing to its way of work from a focus on the post-conflict development, which I would say is a more classic focus of the international development community, developing countries after conflict and the separation between conflict countries and post-conflict countries, to a focus on preventing conflict and addressing some of the issues during conflict to try perhaps to steer it from conflict towards peace and development. So in practice, how does that work? What are some of the areas that the World Bank thinks are critical to address conflict as well as long-term development?
So, I mean, Antonio, you rightly said, and I think it's right. It's also spelled out in the strategy. It's very important to support countries moving out of fragility and focusing on reconstruction. But it's actually even more important to focus on what we call prevention. In fact, we released last year a joint report with the UN, who is an important partner in those countries, United Nations, of course, that shows that $1 invested in prevention allows to save $16 down the road. So what does it mean? One of the key priority for this strategy in those set of countries is really taking a prevention approach, if I may say, which means looking at the root cause of conflict in each country before they turn into full-blown crisis. Now, of course, it's from a development perspective. So in some place, it could be a conflict over shrinking natural resource due to climate change. In other place, it could be about grievances of people not feeling included or feeling like their needs are not being met. So for us, it's very important to focus on the identification, but also on addressing those grievances and helping governments with the right incentive as part of the country dialogue and financing instruments to provide more focus to address those risks. And this is what we are doing under, for instance, our fund for the poorest countries called IDA, the International Development Associations. If I may want just to give one a concrete example for our audience, in Niger, we are focusing on strengthening economic opportunity for young people and women in conflict-affected regions by helping the government to address grievances around service delivery and promoting peaceful management of resource. And also improving the livelihood of marginalized groups. This is very important because this is about preventing the escalation of violence or outbreak of new conflicts by addressing grievances of some groups from a development perspective. So this is really important, Antonio, that you raised that. There's been a shift over the past decades from a focus on reconstructions to a focus now, which is an important point about prevention, and also I would say a focus on working during crisis, which is another area of the strategy that we presented last February to our board. The whole point here is to say that we cannot wait for the end of a conflict. It's very important, even during this period of crisis and conflict, to be present, but of course, focusing on our mandate. We are not the Blue Helmets, we are not the Red Cross. Our mandate and mission remains development, and I think it's very important. So, but it's very complementary to what other partners are doing. Our approach consists in supporting long-term investment in institutions, ensuring that local institutions can meet the basic needs of population, and in this regard, it's very complementary to what other humanitarian actors are doing. So 3 key points. Yes, there has been a shift over the past decades from a focus on reconstruction to different area of engagement during crisis, during conflict, and also focusing on prevention, always remaining with a mandate of development. This is our comparative advantage, but also it shows the importance of partnering during conflict or even before with other organizations. And I can extend more on this notion of partnership, which is essential. It's really about humility, recognizing that for any development actors to be effective in those very fragile settings, it's not just good to partner with other organizations, it's a must. We must partner with peacekeeping, peace-building actors, security actors, humanitarian actors, because they have comparative advantage, proximity to the most marginalized groups, but also they have also a lot of experience. If I'm looking, for instance, just to finish on the forced displacement agenda, which is a very important agenda. We have the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. We are partnering with many humanitarian organizations, including UNHCR. They have the expertise, and we provide incentive for government to host refugee, and therefore both UNHCR and the World Bank help countries to move on the policy dialogue, which is so important to provide jobs and services for both hosting communities but also refugee. So a good example about one area where the bank was not necessarily present decades ago. I'm talking about the addressing refugee crisis, and we realized that it's not anymore a humanitarian crisis. This is actually both development and humanitarian crisis. It's a protracted crisis where refugees are staying 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and they need water, food, blanket, but they also need education, health. And this is exactly the role of development actors. So there's been a shift over the past decades, and this notion, just to finish, of partnership with other organizations, I can come back to it if you wish, is extremely important.
Right. So the one of the issues that I found very interesting in the strategy as well is that it mentions middle income countries. So again, it's a shift from the classic approach of international development and work towards fragile states to focus on low-income countries, countries like Somalia, like Afghanistan, that are very poor and with very fragile political structures. However, um, as myself and other colleagues at the Institute and in this broader field of conflict and violence studies often discover is that you go to middle income countries and they also have problems in some areas. For instance, urban areas is an area that we focus with violence, with some governance and infrastructure. So how is the World Bank working with middle income countries, and how does that help in tackling conflict and fragility?
So the World Bank, as I tried to mention before, is working on this agenda of fragility, conflict, and violence in both low and middle income countries. We have different tools, different financing instruments, but at the end of the day, the whole point is how can we help countries addressing grievances, sometimes at the national level, sometimes at the subnational level. If you look in the Philippines, we are really helping the government focusing on Mindanao and providing support at the subnational level. But I could be also saying that we are helping countries like Lebanon, like Jordan, that are being impacted by the Syrian crisis. So the whole point is actually to go beyond this dichotomy of low or lower middle income countries and try to see how we can best achieve our twin goal. And in this context, tackling the issue of fragility, conflict, and violence is important in all countries. What does it mean? For instance, let's take a concrete example. We are helping Jordan, Lebanon, that are being impacted by the Syrian crisis by providing concessional financing, recognizing the global public good they are offering to the international community by opening their border. There are countries that have the highest number of refugees per capita worldwide, and it's very important for us to support those countries as well, like we support other countries like Central African Republic, Somalia, Afghanistan. So yes, this strategy shows that also, in fact, the number of violent conflicts has even more increased in middle-income countries compared to low-income countries. So it's very important to address this issue across the board in a holistic manner.
Frank, maybe just to return to the question of partnerships. I know that the strategy for fragility, conflict, and violence has also mentioned that the World Bank, as you also did, will step up its emphasis on partnerships in its projects. But aside from other international organizations and civil society groups, it also mentions the private sector. Could you maybe speak to this a little bit more?
Thank you. So let me say that first, the strategy is in fact, and Mia, your question is a good segue, is a strategy of the World Bank Group. What does it mean? It's a strategy not only of the World Bank, who is working with government counterpart, but also with our sister organization, the IFC and MIGA, that are providing support to private sector. And this is essential. I mean, 80% of jobs in countries impacted by fragility, conflict, and violence are coming not from state-owned enterprise or government, but by private sector. So the strategy really puts together the different toolkit that we have at our level, not only from the bank side, providing support to government to have the right investment climate, the right governance, the right level of institution with the capacity, but also to have a focus on private sector, especially SMEs. So important, SMEs, because at the end of the day, this is where you generate jobs. And jobs in FCV settings, it's not only about economic growth. It's about stabilization, as you know. Private sector is essential in this context. So partnership with private sectors is key, especially with IFC and MIGA, which are the two entities of the World Bank Group dealing directly with private sector, providing guarantee, providing incentive, concessional financing to some extent to allow those private sector companies to invest in those countries that represent usually typically a higher level of risk. So this is where we focus jointly with our IFC and MIGA organization. But partnership, Meia, if I may, goes beyond. Partnership with civil society, I mentioned it before, it's critical. Not only international, but also local CSO that are very often doing a great job on the front line next to the supporting the most marginalized groups. So that's important. But also partnership, I would say, with many organizations. I mean, if you look at in the Sahel, for instance, we are a key partner of the Sahel Alliance, along with the United Nations, where we are working with development and security actors to deliver $6.7 billion in financing in insecure area across the region. I mean, a concrete example of last year, in the center of Mali, for instance, the World Bank is contributing to the reconstruction and stabilization of the Kona Economic Zone, which is a project which is quite key in terms of rehabilitation of key productive infrastructures, creating jobs, and ultimately providing basic services to local communities impacted by conflict. This is very important. This is helping the state to reestablish accountability, presence, legitimacy in area where otherwise young people could be tempted to go to with another form of state. So very important to work in this insecure area, but to do so, we need to partner with other organizations that have the presence and that also have experience in this critical part of the countries. That's why I would just to finish on the partnership, you know, with UN peacekeeping mission in DRC, in Mali, in CR are critical. We have been able to provide development support only because we had a very strong partnership with peacekeeping missions. So the strategy makes the point about partnership in the sense of partnership with other development actors, partnership with bilateral actors, which is essential. But it's not only about financing. It's about partnership with organizations that have different mandates, different experience, different skills than the development skills that we have, so that we can be more effective on the ground.
I mean, that's fascinating, and thank you so much for that, for extrapolating on that. My question, I suppose, to follow up would be, how do you maintain a level standard across all of these different actors working in different sectors and perhaps from different countries and systems as well?
What do you mean exactly by level of standards, if I may?
Well, standard, for example, in project implementation, in evaluation, how does that come together?
Okay, well, on that, the bank has clear policies that apply to all the countries, which is about environmental, social, financial management, procurement. And every time that we help countries preparing projects, it has to fulfill all those policies. And I have to say that we even obviously pay more attention to those aspects in countries where capacity is weak, and that's very important. At the end of the day, the strategy makes the point, Meia, on the fact that we need to have a tailored approach. We need to recognize that each country will face different fragile situation, different issue. We need to have more granularity to the issue. What are the root cause of fragility that we are trying to address? Is it about lack of governance? Is it about lack of services or job to some lagging regions? So that's actually for us critical as well, is to have a better assessment, which now we are doing in a systematic manner in all those countries, so that we can inform our partnership with the government and focus on areas that we believe are critical. So this is also the tailored approach that I wanted to mention, beyond the fact that all our policies, of course, on environmental, social aspects, procurement, financial management, apply across the board.
Thank you. If I could ask a question about technology. I know that the strategy mentions that the World Bank is increasingly looking to tech solutions for some of its work. What type of technologies is the World Bank increasingly looking to using?
So, Mia, thank you for the questions. Actually, leveraging ICT in those type of challenging environment and a remote and secure environment is critical. And I have to say that over the past years, we really have focused on geo-enabling for monitoring and supervision on our program that we are financing, which allows not only the bank, but also government, country, and other partners to have access to more regular, real-time, and actionable data for challenging environment. When you don't have the presence on the ground, when it's difficult because it's insecure, not only the bank as an actor, but also I would say the government, it's important to think out of the box. We have those capacity. This is the geo-enabling for monitoring and services that we are using called GEMS that has been launched and that allows us to already cover more than 30 countries, more than 550 projects, and helps again to get immediate feedback from citizens to see that, yes, the school has been built, but the teacher is not there. And this type of feedback not only help to have more accountability, to build citizen engagement, super important in those type of settings, but also it helps to strengthen the capacity of the government, of the country, even when the project financed by the bank is completed. This still remains and helps the government to have better ways of monitor progress as part of national plan. So yes, leveraging ICT is critical, especially in those remote and secure environment where you don't have necessarily the feet on the ground, but you need to have an eye on the ground, if I may say.
Frank, one of the trends that increasingly are clear for contemporary armed conflict is that it's very rare to see a clear break between, as we discussed before, between conflict and post-conflict, but also that conflicts themselves tend to be protracted over long periods of time, often involving non-state armed groups, insurgents, militias, vigilantes. So do you think that this fragmentation of conflict into lower intensity but longer cycles of violence, was that behind some of the rationale for the World Bank to start working and not wait for conflicts to end? But more broadly, how do you think that this prolonged trend of conflict affect the picture of fragility and underdevelopment, and perhaps even more broadly the sustainable development goals that intend to eliminate extreme poverty by 2030? How does the fragile conflict picture uh, interact with this laudable goals of ending poverty?
Well, I mean, it's clear that the global fragility landscape has worsened significantly over the past few years. You clearly, as I was mentioning, have more and more violent conflicts, but also it's not only in terms of numbers, Antonio, like you rightly pointed out, it's about the nature of conflict and the complexity that has completely changed, involving indeed some non-state actors. You have more and more violent extremism that are taking advantage of the vacuum of the state, in some case not being able to provide services to the most marginalized groups and to young people that are turning to non-state actors, quote unquote. So I think it's very important to recognize that, yes, the numbers of conflict is actually quite significant. There are now today more violent conflicts globally than at any time in the past 30 years. We are also facing, the largest forced displacement crisis ever recorded, and we see rising inequality, lack of opportunity, discrimination, exclusions that are fueling, all those grievances. And that's why the strategy and the work of the bank overall is precisely to try to help government tackling those root cause of fragility, because again, there is a direct link with the poverty. As I was mentioning, by 2030, more than half of the world extreme poor will be living in countries characterized by fragility, conflict, and violence. And therefore, we need to focus on those countries, low income or middle income, if we want to succeed our mission. But you are completely right that the fragility landscape has evolved, not only in terms of number of violent conflicts, but also in terms of actors being involved. And for us, it's really emphasized the importance of our mission of supporting country to really be accountable to citizens, to address grievances, to address the root cause of fragility, in order to achieve the twin goal, which includes eradication of poverty.
So, are you concerned that the current pandemic that we're living through with coronavirus, I assume that it can't be good news for fragile and conflict-affected countries. How do you think it will impact some of, perhaps pick one or two examples if you want, but how do you think it will impact conflict-affected countries? And perhaps on the longer term, do you think that the multilateral system, which the World Bank is part of, will retain its capacity to support fragile states through what seems likely to be a global economic crisis?
So, I mean, clearly, COVID-19 spreads across countries, and the impact of the pandemic could be significant and much greater in countries impacted by fragility, conflict, and violence. I mean, these countries, as you know, face existing challenges that are due to typically human capital deprivation, lack of basic infrastructure for health and other services. And that's why from the World Bank Group, as you may have heard, over the next 15 months, the World Bank Group will deploy as much as $160 billion that will be tailored to the health, economic, and social shocks that countries are facing. Because it's very important to look about how to strengthen their health systems, but also to go beyond. And I think it's very important also to recognize that we have been quite fast in the response. I will give you one example: $100 million that support Afghanistan to slow and limit the spread of COVID-19. Where we help the government to enhance the detection, the surveillance, the laboratory system, but also very important to strengthen the healthcare delivery and intensive care. Same for Yemen, where we have a partnership with WHO. So, and we are always looking in these countries at forced displaced people and refugees that are extremely vulnerable as well. So it's in full line with the strategy that we talked about. And in addition, I would say those countries are, of course, hit hardest by the macroeconomic impact of crisis. So the bank is also helping countries to devise tailored, fiscally sustainable policy response that will support weathering the crisis in the short term and economic recovery in the medium term. So a lot of support that goes beyond, of course, the health support and is looking at three pillars. One helping those countries implement emergency health operation and strengthen their economic resilience. Two, focus on the poorest and the most vulnerable. I was mentioning refugee hosting communities, but it's very important to give cash to the poor that are being impacted significantly. It's exactly what we are doing. And the last but not least, it's also supporting on businesses, jobs, and that's why we work also with IFC and Meia. So it's a major crisis, major impact in those countries that have already very weak systems, if I may say, and that's why the bank is stepping up in the response as well.
Many of these countries, Frank, as you well know, are facing rapid urbanization processes. So their cities are growing quite quickly, and without local and national governments being very prepared to step up in service provision and governance. How do you think that urban growth impacts the relationship between conflict and development? And are you a pessimistic or are you more optimistic about the role of cities in conflict-affected countries? Because after all, cities also have a positive role in being centers of economic development, right?
Yes, I mean, I try to be always optimistic in general, especially when the challenges are at the level that we are facing. I think overall, the incidence and impact of COVID-19 can vary significantly, if I may, depending on the countries and over time. But it's true that urban areas, as typically being the hardest hit initially. I mean, you have you know capacity of the government to provide support to those households is sometimes limited by the fact that they don't always have in urban area existing social safety net programs compared to rural area. You also have the fact that the risk of disruption to the food supply and markets, which are a little bit higher in those cases. So clearly, cities but are quite important, not only because of the demographics, a world that is becoming more and more urbanized, but also that because the typical protection system are not always in place in those settings. So we are focusing in rural and urban area. Always a focus for us is the marginalized groups, the poorest, the most vulnerable, and that was my point before. There's not one single bullet solution. You need to look at country by country, and the response, even if you look just the continent, Africa, will be different from one country to another, depending on the dynamics, depending about what is the current national system, social safety net, and how we can leverage the existing program, not to reinvent the wheel, but to be as fast as possible, helping government to respond to this crisis. In this regard, I have to say that partnership with other organizations is critical. Our partnership, as part of the response to COVID-19 with the UN system, WHO, obviously, is extremely important. And partnership with other MDBs and other actors is critical. So that's also part of our response, is actually to provide support to countries that allow other partners to piggyback and provide additional financing, because we know it's really an action that is required from the entire international community. And on your question on the focus on cities, you are completely right. We need also to focus on the urban areas that are being the hardest initially, and try to see how to leverage our program in those specific settings. But it's also, looking at the other side of the coin. It's an opportunity to build resilience and to make sure that cities are prepared for future crises. So it's also an opportunity to focus on those elements.
Well, Frank, I think we're going to end it on your positive and optimistic final remark. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and really emphasizing the need for a tailored approach to solving these very large and global questions. And thank you to our listeners as well for joining us again this week. Please subscribe to Sound Strategic for more in-depth discussions just like this. And to keep up to date with the latest trends in international security and armed conflicts, please do follow us on Twitter and Instagram. See you all next time.